Welcome back to Cause 3D. Today we are going to work on the Lazy Susan that gives R2 the ability to move his dome. I see a lot of people working on this and they have confusion, and I'll admit I had confusion the first couple I built as well, but today we're going to break it down, hopefully make it a little bit easier for you to understand. So let's get right to it. All right guys, so the Lazy Susan's actually a relatively easy thing. So as you can see here, I've already got my dome motor in and I have just my Lazy Susan sitting. And the reason you see some tape here is because I want it in this orientation when it's moving forward. So I want to bolt it in this way because I want to make sure that I have the bottom of the dome here. I want this part right here to actually be the front of the face here, because I want these two screws in the front because that is probably the weakest point when you're driving. The back one's just going to hold it central. So let's break this down and remove the Lazy Susan that is not currently bolted in. And that gives us a good view here of the ring that goes into this body ring here. Now I've got it bolted in. I've got my screws, which you probably can't see, but my square nut screw, or my square nuts are in this top ring already. And if you look closely, which again, I apologize, you probably can't see it on the camera, but my square nuts are all tipping forward, backwards, in every which direction right now. So we're gonna have to take a moment to recenter these all back to where they need to be. A really easy way to do that is an ice pick of some kind or a pick. I also use a magnet. You can grab those screws and move them back over if they get too far out where you can't get it with your pick. And let's see, that one's set. And we're going to fight this a little bit as we go. So because we are sitting currently at an angle here, tilted back, it's a lot easier to do it with it straight up and down, but I don't want to take the motors off and set him back on his blocks. So we're just going to work with what we have from here. So the first thing I want to talk about is your Lazy Susan. Now I am going to put a link down below on which Lazy Susan I use, and there are multiple options out there. There's no right or wrong necessarily, unless it's the incorrect size, which I will also link in the description. So we are going to first take our Lazy Susan. We're going to get rid of this gear here real quick, just to keep things from getting confusing. Okay, so as you can see, I have now unscrewed everything that is a part of this Lazy Susan. I'm leaving my top ring in. You want your bolts that protrude through the body to be cut pretty well flush so they're not sticking up. I do have a couple that are sticking up ever so slightly. We're going to use some spacers in that in just a moment. So your Lazy Susan should, in theory, pre-drilled holes in it. If it doesn't, you'll want to use the holes that already exist, but you may have to drill some extra holes. And in this case, I think I put a couple extra. I had 3 on this side, which probably was plenty, but I ended up drilling 3 more and I countersunk them. Same goes with the outside. I believe all the holes on the outside are the current holes that came with the Susan. Now, they should, on the outer holes, they should line up. The reason, again, I've got this orientation with my tape is because I want to work from the same area every single time. But your bolts that you're getting ready to install on the Susan should, in theory, line up with what's already in your gear, and they do. Now I had to file out just a little bit of the plastic in the gear so that we didn't have too much tension on it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this for the moment. I am going to bolt my gear to my Susan first. So let me grab my bolts, and we'll try to do this in camera here. So I'm coming in from underneath. I am using extra long bolts. I don't know if these will be too long once I get my dome on or not for sure yet. I don't think they will. So I'm gonna get one started here. I'm gonna go every other one because 3 bolts typically has always worked really well for me. You don't have to put all 6 in, I don't think. The reason I use the extended longer bolts is because when we slide that dome over these bolts that are going to be there, the dome is going to not be able to just slide off, pop off. I mean, it's going to have to travel the distance of that screw in order for it to pop off. So it should promote easy on and off removal and access if we need to take it on and off. I'm going to tighten these up a little bit. I'm not getting crazy with them. Just get them nice and firm. Because even if they do rattle loose slightly, they're only going to travel from here to the top ring there, so they're not going to go too far. All right, so we're in there. Now we're going to go and attach our outer part of the Lazy Susan to that top body ring. Now with this part, we're going to use spacers. I cannot tell you exactly which spacers you're going to need. It's all going to be dependent on which Lazy Susan you use, but what we want is we want just a bit of a gap here that will raise this slightly above the Lazy Susan. And those you're going to just have to play with. They're in the files. But what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to line up our square nut here. So we're going to line up our square nuts with the holes. And this gets a little bit challenging. So we're going to drop a spacer in here. Let's capture that square nut. We now have our spacers in underneath our Lazy Susan, and we are ready to tighten up the Lazy Susan to our top body ring. And hopefully we grabbed all of the, we did, grabbed all the square nuts in there. I get these snug, I don't get crazy with them. You don't need to super torque them down. Just nice and snug. All right, so that now has the Lazy Susan attached with your gear in there. The next thing we want to do is we are going to attach the bottom ring for the dome. Now I have already on camera, I have drilled this off, and you'll notice these larger holes that are in here were my first attempt at drilling it, and I misdrilled, but I went back and what I did to make it a little bit easier on myself is when everything's apart, I just simply flipped everything over, drilled my holes from the other side coming into this top ring here, or the bottom ring of the dome. And now we're going to go over to the workbench and we're going to attach this dome up into, or attach the bottom ring dome into the dome. And I am going to do that off camera because it's pretty self-explanatory, and then we'll come back to this and we'll get it installed. All right, so we have our dome ring in here, and it's screwed in and attached. Now I did dry fit it, and it is a little still, this system right here is still a little low, so I need to come back in and put different spacers in here to get it built up. But for right now, to get an idea of how much more I need to go up, I'm just going to drop 3 of these spacers in here, and we're going to try to finagle this dome on hitting these holes. So it's on, it does spin. We've got a decent gap there, so it looks like I just need to go in and put a little bit bigger spacers in the underneath the Lazy Susan. But that is it. I'm not going to say it's easy by any stretch, but the gap that we're most concerned with is right here on the single print domes. We need to make sure that that gap has got enough room for it to be able to move. So that's the most important gap that we have. And I noticed here in the back, it might just be how he's sitting, but there's actually no gap there. So we may have to shim it back here with a different shim, just to get him to level out a little bit. But there you have it. That's pretty much how you install the Lazy Susan. Well, thanks for joining us again today, guys, and hopefully this illuminated a little bit of the confusion when you're putting these in. I don't know that you need to go into a ton more detail because the directions online are relatively clear as well, but it always helps me to be able to actually sit down and see which order they go in, you know, when you need to drill your holes into your dome ring up in the top, and so on. So hit the like and subscribe button, and we will see you in the next video.